Welcome everyone to Unite, Unity Temple's weekly interspiritual service. I'm Reverend Nhien, and we are in the middle of this amazing 10-week series on the Enneagram. So just so you know, this is more of a lesson series than like the typical sermon. And so the first week, what we did was we explored the point 1 on the Enneagram. And we're exploring the Enneagram. Some of you may be familiar with the Enneagram as a system of personality. We're exploring this on that level, but also primarily as a spiritual system. So we looked at point 1, and the idea represented by that point on the Enneagram is that of holy perfection. So the idea is that the personality type structure, point 1, was constructed based on the false belief that that holy perfection is fundamentally missing from the universe. So as a compensatory way of dealing with that. And so what does the type 1 do? The type 1 goes in and thinks, hey, if the universe isn't perfect, my radar is going to be on what's wrong, not because I'm kind of masochistic or whatever, but so that I can fix it, so that I could perfect the universe. So you see the compulsive looking of the structure of that type, which happens to be my type on the Enneagram, is based on the fundamental false belief that the universe isn't all perfect exactly as it is, but as we teach here in Unity, there is a fundamental rightness to things as they are, and when we see that truth back of our personality, we start to live from that truth. Then last week, we talked about the point 2 on the Enneagram. Now that point is constructed from the false, erroneous belief that two faces of the divine, two faces of reality are missing. And that is the face of holy will, that there's just one will operating for the good of all, somehow is not in the awareness of the type 2 on the Enneagram. And then corresponding to that, the holy freedom is missing. And so if you don't believe that there is one will acting for the good of all, but instead then, my wants and my needs are in competition with yours, then the two starts devising a structure of personality around how do I get needs met? Well, there's sort of this weird reverse psychology of if I focus on your needs, if I scan the room, not for mistakes like ones, but for what is needed by my special somebodies, then those people will then turn around and meet my needs. So again, a personality structure developed based on this false belief. And so today we enter into point 3 on the Enneagram. So a really distraught man approached a Zen master one day and said, Master, I'm desperate. I don't know what to do. I feel lost. I don't know who I am. Will you please show me my true being? He asked. But the Zen master looks away, doesn't even look at him, doesn't say a word. And so the man, again, desperate, begins to beg and plead. And he gets on his knees even to beg and plead the Zen master, but still, the Zen master doesn't even look at the man and kind of looks away. And then finally, the desperate man gets frustrated and just decides, okay, and starts to walk away. And as he walks away, finally, the Zen master looks over, calls the man's name, and the man turns around and says, yes? And the master says, there it is. There it is. So my question for you here today is, who are you? Who are you when you're not trying or seeking to be yourself, if you will? But who are you in those spontaneous, natural moments of your life? The question of identity is at the core of the point 3 on the Enneagram that we'll be exploring here today. We'll do it in 3 parts. First, let's explore together this question of identity. Who are you? And we'll look at the fact that we can actually approach this question on 2 levels. There's a question of who I think I am, my concept of self, or my self-image even, and then the difference of who I really am, or arguably, what I really am. And then second, we'll explore from the point of view of the Enneagram, this idea that our lack of knowing stems in part from our lack of connection to the face of God that is represented by the holy ideas, that a blend of holy ideas that is found on point 3 of the Enneagram. And that blend is holy law. We just put holy law up there because the rest of them was kind of long to write. Holy law, holy harmony, and then holy hope. But really, the holy idea of type 3 is like a blend of all 3 of these. So think of it as point 3 has 3 holy ideas associated. We'll look at the fact of what those ideas represent, what they mean, and how coming to an awareness, a deeper awareness of that, can support us in actually living from our true nature. And then third, we'll look at how applying this idea helps us to come to a place where this virtue of veracity. How many of us judge when people are deceitful, but even short of being deceitful, we can be judgmental when people are just inauthentic, right? And so let's look at that, what that might really mean from a very compassionate point of view of why, not just others, but why do we not show up in veracity or authenticity or truthfulness, which is the virtue of the 3, and how we can, through being and being awake to these holy ideas, rather than simply striving to be more authentic, can actually serve to create an effortless authenticity in the way that we show up in the world. So first, my question to you, when you think about this question, who am I? And even when you ease into that, who am I when I'm home alone and no one can see me? How am I in that way? Because I might have a persona as being this, lawyerly, like whatever. But when I'm at home, I like puns, I like silly jokes. Like there's a naturalness to my sense of humor that will come out when I feel super comfortable. And I might tell people, or people who might really know me might say, oh, that's the real me. The real Nhien, loves poetry, is super dramatic and passionate, and does all these things that have to do with sort of the more creative side of life that might not be the side that people have historically seen in the world. But if I'm really honest with myself, I might also say that who I am is also substantially stubborn, that who I am is sometimes maybe a little bit more critical than the average person, often self-critical. Those might be qualities that I describe of myself when I think about my real self. So I'm going to invite you to consider and just think to yourself of 3 traits right now that you would use to describe yourself. And in fact, I'm going to invite you to do something even a little bit more bold, which is, if you're comfortable doing so, turn to one of your neighbors and describe these 3 traits to them. So let's take a moment to do that. Who am I? What am I like? Take a moment. I'll ask you to start to wrap it up, and even if you're not totally finished, because I'm going to give you a forum for shouting it out to me up here. So you can answer the question either, who am I? Who do I say I am? Or you can answer the question, what do other people say I am? Any hands? All right, what brave souls do we have? Who are you?
Three that we wrote down first.
Sure.
I wrote scattered,
Scattered,
giving,
giving,
optimistic.
optimistic. Great, thank you, Terry. Anyone else? And brave. How about that? Maka.
Conscientious, attentive, and
Conscientious, attentive,
loving.
and loving. Beautiful. Thank you, Maka. Yeah, Shane. Gentle, loving, and awkward. Thank you for your authenticity. Anyone else? How about who do people say you are? Oh, back there, Jen. Competent, organized, and problem solving. Great, thank you. One more? I think we have. Did we have one over here? Okay, back here. Impatient, thank you. All right, like end results. We might have a 3 in our midst. So great. So there's a story in the Bible, about how Jesus asked Peter one day, when Peter was like, "Who are you?" kind of, and he's like, "Well, what do people say I am?" And he's like, "Well, some people talk about you as like the carpenter. Some people say you're like Moses or Elias, but what happens in that story? What happens is that Jesus then asks Peter, "Well, who do you think I am?" And the Peter apparently has the right answer. "You are the living Son of the living God," he says. And in that moment, he says, other people mistake Jesus for his personhood, that the chief misapprehension taught in unity around who Jesus is or what he is that he's been associated with his personhood when what he really is you are the Christ, the Son of the living God. And as we teach here in Unity, that's not exclusive to Jesus, but the idea is this, that fundamentally who you are, you could be described by your characteristics, but fundamentally who you are is not a who at all, but a what. That you are the Christ. So that question, what are you, becomes more primary as we begin to uncover, what is this underlying truth, the essence of being, that which is changeless, that which is foundational, the essence of who or what I actually am. And so we begin by first looking at the fallacy of what people say we are. And to this, I have this wonderful poem joke that I came across that I had to share with you today on the lies people say about other people. We know what it's like to rely on what other people say about who we are. And this poem kind of embodies this. First, somebody told it. Then the room couldn't hold it. So the busy tongues rolled it till they got it outside. Then the crowd came across it and never once lost it, but tossed it till it grew long and wide. This lie brought forth others, dark sisters and brothers and fathers and mothers, a terrible crew. And while headlong they hurried, the people they flurried, and troubled and worried as lies always do. And so evil-bodied, this monster lay goaded, till at last it exploded in smoke and in shame. Then from mud and from mire, the pieces flew higher and hit the sad victim and killed a good name. Yeah. So a lot of times, I know I personally have felt very hurt by the lies that others have told about me. And that hurt, I have recognized, had a lot to do with this idea that Somehow, my worth, who I am, is something that you can name, right? That's something that you can tell me or describe to me, that you can label. But the funny thing about this, when I read this same poem from this more spiritual perspective, is that those tales and those people could all be just me. That I'm the one giving myself false names when I limit myself to the characteristics that I give myself each and every day, even positive ones, because what does that mean? A good girl doesn't do that, which that might be an authentic expression of who I am. Oh, because selfish people do that and you're not like that. That all the names that I give myself are actually ones that limit my authentic expression. So we can still hold the characteristics that we hold. There's nothing wrong with that. It's about locking us in to those labels that we have placed on ourselves, much less the labels others have placed upon us. And I know a bunch of the labels I have on myself are ones that I took on from the outside. Because, maybe when I was a kid, I was messy and creative and all that. But my mom said that wasn't what good girls do. So I cleaned up, and get all together and got poised and stopped doing my crafts because my crafts made a mess in the whole house, right? And so, but I took that on, and then it became the name I gave myself. And so we begin by looking at that, the names we give ourselves. Again, we're talking about the point 3 on the Enneagram. The Enneagram is a map of consciousness. And so even though the point 3 is associated with type 3, we can say that this point applies universally to all of us, except that type 3 took it the most personally. That's how we can look at it. The type 3 took this on and was particularly good at it. Good at claiming the labels, taking it on, and making sure I'm going to live up to the image of myself. But we all do this to some degree. And so we can remind ourselves, not who are we, but what are we? A living expression of that infinite spirit that some of us call God, that some of us call love, that some of us just call being or reality with a capital R. That we are an expression of that. So let's look at what that might mean by looking at the 3 faces of being or reality that are embodied at point 3, because the reaction, the deception, the self-deception that arises from the fundamental lie that started all the way back here when we lost sight of awareness of that facet of reality that is described by holy law, holy harmony, and holy hope. So let's begin first with holy law. So last week, all of these facets of being are so intertwined. I want to make a clear distinction. Last week, we talked about will, and this idea of wantingness and how that moves out into expression. This is a very related concept, which is this idea that there is one, not only just one will. If we believe what unity teaches, there's only one presence, there's only one will, there's only one activity happening, that there is a fundamental unity to all of life. And if maybe we're quiet enough, we can feel into this unity in which holy law says that through time and space, through change, there is just this unity that moves through all of that. It's not, here's wholeness and unity, and then over here I'm acting as a separate doer. That's the fallacy of the point 3, that I'm a separate doer in the world, that I'm broken apart from the activity and movement of the one over time through change. So unity through change is holy law, as described by the Enneagram. Now, what would happen if I knew that? Related to knowing that, I sense into this idea of holy harmony, that as we talked about last week, the movement of the sun and the stars and the movement of my leg and my arm are all part of the activity of the one life. Do I know that? Or do I believe that there are many separate doers in the world, each acting independently with different wills, trying to and going in different directions that are in conflict and not in holy harmony with one another? Would I be willing, if I believe in separate doingness, would I be willing to kind of sit still and rest and even entertain the idea that maybe there is only the activity of the one moving in harmony, that a wave crashing against the other wave is not a conflict or opposition, but all part of the activity and pattern of the one life? Can that be true? Can it be possible that the person at work who feels competitive with you is not against you, but is part of the movement of the one? What if you knew that to be true? How would you show up? How would you show up if the guy that seems to be going too slowly in front of you, seeming to thwart your doingness and accomplishment of your goals in the world, was actually part of the one activity of which you are a part, aligned and in harmony with you? If you knew those two, holy hope emerges naturally from that. Holy hope is, in my words, the woohoo. That's my definition of holy hope. It's the, I know this to be true. And so life can be this optimistic, sort of natural movement, not a matter of looking into the future and being concerned, and then realizing and believing that I have to compete for my good, that my activity has to be better than your activity, right, in order for me to prevail. What if I knew holy law and holy harmony? Then holy hope is this ease, this joy that looks faithfully in the future and is glad. Yeah, and is glad. And so the invitation as we progress through these weeks, again, is not to ever try to effort and take on the virtue that we are working on. You know, we don't take on the virtue of humility last week or veracity this week. We simply center ourselves in the holy ideas, in the truth of that face of God that seems to be missing, especially to the Enneagram type 3, and allow something to emerge from that. And so this all can sound fine and dandy and highfalutin and nice, but the question is, how do we actually do it? How might we incorporate these ideas? Certainly by considering them. Certainly first by looking at the ways we act and show up that don't testify to that basic truth. Do we believe in oneness or do we not? And if we believe in oneness, how can there not be one activity expressing? And so where in my life am I acting like there's oppositional activity, different wills and now different doers, and doing against me? And doing better than me sometimes, and doing worse than me other times. That comparison of the Enneagram type 3. But what if we can fall back into this question of how we tend to go away from authentic being because if there is a world in which we don't believe this, guess what? We're going to have to be competitive. And as Victor shared earlier, the core of the three is this belief that I am a separate doer in the world. So in order to get my needs met, there's a lot of competing doing. I got to be the best doing in the world, right? I got to be accomplished. Whatever the norm, I have to be better than you. And because I don't know my authentic self, because I don't feel into the validity of that, it's not just about being better. It's about you having to validate and name me as better. And that's why the three can be so focused on the external validation points, right? Because I don't even know myself. There's something empty here. I don't know this core to my being, so I don't know that I am the son of the living God. So you tell me who I am. So world, Chameleon, next slide. If you think about it like a chameleon, it's a survival strategy to adapt to the world or environment around us. And the three, again, the type 3 happens to do this particularly well, is rather obsessed with it. This is my thing, because this is the point that I have lost sight of the most. And so we need to ask ourselves, when we, as I shared earlier, we walk into a room, how many of us have said this? They're so fake. They're so superficial. And we say it with a kind of disdain, like with a judgment around that, projecting outward, that like we don't like inauthentic people. We're suspicious often of inauthentic people. We don't know that we can trust them. So what I'd like to invite is when we have that stance, that much of that comes from lack of integrating it in our own being, meaning all of us are lying in some ways, maybe not consciously, but there's a deception that happens on multiple levels. Some people lie outright. Others lie only in the sense of omission. Others lie in the sense of simply putting on an image for the world to see, even though you know, like you're not that. Even something as simple as, I'm feeling scared, but I'm going to put on the image of being confident, right? So there's that level. But going deeper back, each of us, to some extent, if we don't know our authentic being, there's a way in which we lie to ourselves when we say only, I am this, right? I am caring, or I am good, or I am kind. That there's something in that we can start to see is actually limiting our authentic expression. How many of you have said, oh, I'm not going to wear that outfit. That's not me. I always thought about that. And was like, well, but if you want to wear it, then isn't it you? But what we're really saying when we say that is, it's not my image of myself. It's not what people think of me, right? That it's not that. But we do that not just with clothes. We're not going to show up that way because that's not me. I'm not that kind of person. What if this authentic expression of you in this moment was actually exactly that? And your self-concept limits and then presents a lie to the world. And so when we can look at that and understand that really it's because we're not connected to source, we believe our image is our identity, the three more so than others, it's a survival thing like with the chameleon, then maybe we can have some gentleness and compassion when we're realizing that this person in the room is superficial. They're not showing me their deeper self. Maybe you're not safe. Maybe you haven't created a safety for that person to feel like, oh, I can be loved for my true self. And then maybe you're not showing up in your true self because you haven't been a safe space for yourself. What if you haven't been an accepting and safe space for yourself to say, oh, wow, what I'm like that feels like different from everyone else in the room, that's okay. That's deeply okay. That what if everyone's cheerful and I'm feeling sad and that feels authentic? Can that be okay? Or do I have an idea of how I'm supposed to be cheerful in this room, right? Or vice versa. People are sad around you and you just had something glorious happen and you're radiant. Do you dim your light so that others could feel better? In what ways do we lie and deceive? And so I want to invite us to really deeply look at that. I want to close with a concept from Taoism. So in Taoism, there is this idea of Wu Wei, which is actually non-doing. And of course, it's not actually non-doing, but the fundamental teaching behind this is that when we start to actually wake up, many of us go into meditation, we find this point of stillness. Then we get scared. What if I'm not doing anything? What if it's not okay? What if all this rest and relaxation results in me just not doing anything anymore? We start to find a certain peace with the moment. Sandra Maitre, the author of the Passions and Virtues on the Enneagram, talks about how at this point, that's when exactly we need to recline and rest back in this profound principle that the activity, that there is a natural activity of the universe, and I am a part of that. And I can rest in that. Wu Wei, this concept of non-doing, is based on the idea that once we recognize this truth, life doesn't feel like we're acting. Even Jesus said, it's not I, but the Father within that does the work. Somehow, the activity of our lives starts to change, and we, the personhood, isn't doing it anymore. And so this happens, though, when we let ourselves relax and rest into like a deep and profound trust that there's an activity of the one that serves everyone universally, that I'm not excluded from that doingness of life, that I'm not excluded from that. When we learn to work with our own inner nature and with the natural laws operating around us, we reach the level of Wu Wei. Then we work with the natural order of things and operate on the principle of minimal effort. Since the natural world follows that principle, it does not make mistakes. Mistakes are made or imagined by man, the creature with the overloaded brain, who separates himself from the supporting network of natural laws by interfering and trying too hard. But when you work with Wu Wei, you put the round peg in the round hole and the square peg in the square hole. No stress, no struggle. Egotistical desire tries to force the round peg into the square hole and the square peg into the round hole. Cleverness tries to devise craftier ways of making pegs fit where they don't belong, right? And knowledge tries to figure out why round pegs fit into round holes but not square holes. Wu Wei doesn't try. It doesn't think about it. It just does it. And when it does, it doesn't appear to do much of anything. But things get done. So, my invitation to you this week, and now we can go to A. Milne's quote from Pooh. Don't underestimate the value of doing nothing, of just going along, listening to all the things you can't hear and not bothering. Don't underestimate the value of doing nothing. Because there is a deep trust, actually, that when your personhood, when your ego is willing to surrender the idea that you have to do this smart, capable, competent, sometimes irritable person is doing, that when you surrender that, then doingness gets done with so much more effortlessness and peace and joy, because it is the arising of what already is, and it's simply your permission giving and alignment with what is actually true and authentic. And then from that, veracity happens, because veracity is not based on personality, it's based on spirithood. And so my invitation this week is to allow yourself the permission to be still. I now release concealing myself behind a mask. I now release the need to pretend that I'm someone I'm not. I now release the belief that I have value only because of what I do. I now affirm that I am worthy, lovable, and valuable simply because I exist. I now affirm that I am whole and perfect exactly as I am. I now affirm that I can simply be authentically me. I now affirm that I can simply be. And as you bring your attention to the next step and stages of your life, I invite you to remember that when there is a question about who you are cast about from within yourself or all around you, that maybe the response to that is the answer to the question, what am I, rather than who? So I invite you to bring a point of stillness to any manic doing that might be happening, that you may in yourself experience the whatness of this spirit and this light.